Gap plans to launch seasonal vintage drops throughout the year. According to Retail Dive, Gap is expanding its partner with Sean Witherspoon, its global vintage curator, to release
How do
Gap.
you like that job,
Yeah,
Chris?
I don't. I love when people watch us. I get comments sometimes from friends who are like, "I could tell you were smiling as you read that headline that there was
Yeah.
something going on in your head," and that was exactly what I was thinking. Yes, it's global vintage curator. Let's make sure we get that right. To release Gap Vintage, all one word, I might add, which is a series of curated Gap Vintage clothing drops. The program's first drop releases Tuesday and will include Gap pieces from the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, all sourced by Witherspoon. Gap didn't specify how many drops there would be, but did say they would include seasonal and themed drops. The retail price range will vary, but the initial drop includes a 1990s striped pocket t-shirt, classic logo hoodie, and nylon anorak windbreaker priced at $55, $85, and $90 respectively. It also includes a 1980s denim jacket hoodie priced at $90. Sounds like my style, and the collection will be available online in the US with an exclusive collection sold in the company's Flatiron store in New York. And I'm curious,
Yes.
on a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
how much do you like the idea of Gap Vintage?
I'm a hopeful 7.
A
Hopeful
7.
7. Yes.
Wow. Lucky number
And I'll
7.
tell you
All right.
why.
All right.
One, vintage Gap is the most in-demand Gap product right now. Like that's what all
Very
of this
sad.
next generation is looking to. They're not going to the Gap store. They are scouring thrift stores and consignment shops to find this product right now. So I actually like this more from the perspective of it's a way to drive traffic. There's limited drops. They're doing pop-up shops around the globe. Like they're going into and they're doing this on gap.com, which I think is a smart way to just try to gain interest from a new consumer that hopefully comes for the Gap vintage and stays for maybe some new accompanying Gap pieces like t-shirts or some of the other staples. And I do think that more retailers need to be profiting off the reselling of their product, whether it's vintage product or it's just, the drops or resales that we're seeing, much like what we've described in the past with like Nike and GOAT or StockX. Like it doesn't make sense that those companies are profiting off of your brand. But, and here's the big but, Chris.
There's always a but, like we said in the beginning.
The one person or team with Sean Witherspoon, curating one store and some pop-ups,
Yeah.
one drop on gap.com. Like, I don't even know from a marketing perspective if that's enough to get the scale that you want, to get the success that you would want to bring enough people back to the Gap brand. I do think it's an idea worth trying, but I think it really depends on what Richard Dixon and the Gap team plan to do for the next phases of this. Like if it's something they're planning on rolling out. If it's just going to stay this small thing, I unfortunately don't think it's enough to save the Gap. But
you're a 7. You're a 7 with that.
I'm a 7
caveat.
with the
with that
possibility.
caveat. You're a 7.
Well,
Okay.
maybe I'm coming down.
Yeah, I think you're coming
maybe
down
I'm like a 5. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe
You're
I'm like
pulling
a
the
5.
John Clear, reorient yourself here as you're speaking out loud.
I think so. But maybe, I mean, Chris, are you just kicking yourself for not saving all of your vintage Gap anoraks and khakis from the 90s when you were working there? I mean, you could be making buku bucks right now.
Nobody wants my resaleable clothing.
True.
I'm sure that's true.
True. What's your number though? Where do you fall?
I'm at best a 3.
Okay.
Like I'm like in the 2 to 3 range on this.
All right.
Marketing wise, I think it's a great hook. People listen to this stuff, they read about it, people talk about it. You've seen all the chatter on social media about this too, so like it's getting buzz. So yeah, nice job on that. But I think to your point, seasonal drops online in small batches of things you have to source like this, and are on display at one store in New York, they do nothing numbers
and some pop-ups.
But still, like that does nothing numbers wise. Absolutely zero, zilch, nada. Like all 3 of those words to say the word nothing. Like it just nothing comes from it. So, I mean, until I see something that gets people back in the actual stores in mass, I'm going to remain skeptical of Richard Dixon, even though, he's surely got the zeitgeist and he's coming to Shop Talk, and I'm sure he's going to be the most watched session at Shop Talk without a doubt, because even all the points you raised, like the route into resale, yeah, I think it's something you can capitalize on. But that too doesn't stop the bleeding and answer the question of how do you get people into your stores to
Mhm.
shop Gap's regularly priced merchandise, which is what you actually need to
Right.
survive.
Hmm.
So until I see that, um, it's just not going to work. Say nothing of the idea that, like you said, you brought it up. 100%. The idea of scaling and sourcing old vintage clothing is an almost impossible idea to scale in of itself. It's just never going to work in mass. It's not physically, economically sustainable as an idea. So it's just branding, plain and simple. That's why I'm like, this is like a 2 or 3, and I still need to see more in terms of how is he enlivening the product itself to get people to pay full price for what is in a Gap store.
Yeah. I mean, have you changed your thoughts? I know I've asked you this question in the past, but have you changed your thoughts at all about like what would be a move that Dixon could make to get people to do that, Chris? Like, do you,
No,
where,
well, yeah, it's funny. As you were
what do
talking,
you do?
I was thinking about this. Like, I think if this move resonates from a marketing perspective,
Mm-hmm.
then I think you have to have a very, you know, deliberate conversation with your product development team, which, I've always been curious if Zach Posen is the guy to get this, but like,
Yeah.
okay, what is it that the average consumer today in today's world wants from your clothing? Like, do you go into logo merchandise a lot more if that's what people are buying, from the vintage collection? Do you
Mm-hmm.
go into the pieces and just kind of update them? But you have to find some point of position. And then, of course, you have to stand behind that in the store with the inventory, with the bets, with the merchandising to say, hey, folks, if you're coming to a Gap store, this is what we want you to buy. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what Abercrombie has done fairly well. They've taken a product position on certain items and they've done really well with them. And so, fashion retail is the same thing. You got to do that. And I don't know what that is yet. They haven't really
Yeah.
come out and said what that's going to be. I need to go into a Gap store again. It's been like 3 or 4 months since I have, but that's where you could potentially take this, right? You could, but the proof is not there yet for me to say that that's what they're going to do.
So I have a question, a crazy
Okay, we're
idea
gonna
for
stay
you.
on this one. All right.
Maybe we can cut this out if we need to, but so I'm I'm almost curious. Like it really got me thinking. Like this week when we're talking about the de minimis exceptions and Shein and Temu and what that's going to do to the price of their clothing. I'm almost wondering if Gap couldn't come back a la like American Apparel, and could you have success in really, being a brand that's American made, that's providing quality product again? Because we also know that that's an important factor for the next generation of shopper. This Gen Z shopper is looking for quality. Now, price point is a big concern
Yeah.
there, but I think like I'm wondering if that like Gap is an American brand. Like
Yep.
could that help them like provide this resurgence of we're making product here, it's good quality product, we're doing it at the lowest possible price,
Yeah.
but giving you the style and then leaning on, like you're saying, like inspiration from what's selling on Vintage Gap or even Zach
Yeah.
Posen's inspiration. But I mean, do you think that's even a shot that they could take that would help them?
I like where your head is going there. I think that's just a very difficult proposition for a whole host of reasons too. I mean, the business. I don't know that the business model is set up for that. In terms of where their source. Gap has an incredible sourcing arm throughout the world.
Yeah.
There'd be an incredible cost increase to doing that. The problem with Gap too is it sits in this like kind of netherworld in terms of pricing. It's got Old Navy on
Right.
one side, it has Ben on the other. So then you're probably taking the prices for your average Gap piece of clothing up. So maybe, but it would take a long time to get there, and there'd be a lot of pain to rewire the operation that
Right.
way too. And at the same time, you mentioned the competitors, the fast fashion competitors, they can come in and undercut you on price for the same goods, comparably, that you're getting sourced in the US. And I think, generally speaking, I think for the same item, people still gravitate towards price as
Yeah.
much as they want to ring the, hey, made in
Right.
America thing.
Yeah.
Walmart's played that up, but yet at the same time, it's never like, blowing the doors off their business too. So like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
very different, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it'd be harder to do than, it probably, seems, but I
I
don't
just
know.
want Gap to survive, Chris.
I
I
know,
just
me
want it
too.
to.
The the good news is though, the good news is they could be on. I will say this: they could be onto something
Yeah.
if they figure out what it is that their customer wants
Yeah.
going forward and how to price it. Those are two really difficult questions though
For
for
sure.
Gap.
Right. As you said, there's a lot involved in that process.